Welcome to 10-Minute Type Advice by Personality Hacker. I'm Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
This show features questions from the Personality Hacker community that we answer in about 10 minutes. We've been using personality types in our coaching for years, and we'd love to answer your questions about personal growth through the lens of type. You can find out more about us at personalityhacker.com. Okay, now let's hear today's question.
Your podcast has absolutely blown me away. I recently ran into the Myers-Briggs test, and since then I've been reading everything I can on the different personality types. I am an ESFJ. So my issue is my marriage. I have been unhappily married for almost 18 years and have been desperately concerned with what's wrong with me. Discovering my Myers-Briggs type has helped me see that who I am is actually okay. Interestingly enough, everything I read says my type is not compatible with my husband's type, which is INTJ. Listening to your podcast about his type explains a lot, but I've struggled to find information on how to make our incompatible marriage work. I've heard you say that any two types can get along. I've always felt disrespected and undervalued. He is insensitive, critical, distracted, and ambivalent. This led me recently to have an emotional affair with someone who made me feel attractive, smart, interesting, and valuable. In the end, I would rather make my own marriage work better. I don't believe the grass is actually greener anywhere else. Can you help me figure out how to be happily married, realizing that I can't change him and he can't change me? How do we accommodate incompatible personality types in our marriage? Y'all are amazing. I love to hear how you respect each other and support each other in your podcasts. I'm looking forward to see if you can actually help me figure this out. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. In your voice, I can hear there's a lot of pain, quite frankly, and emotion in this question you have, because this is a relationship that I'm sure you've been together with this person for a while, and it matters to you. It's something important to you, and you want it to work out. And good on you for being the one to take the initiative to say, what can I do? How can I look at this? How can I understand more about myself, the person I'm in a relationship with? Like, man, I wish everybody would do what you're doing. So I just want to honor and validate the fact that this is probably tough to ask for help in some of these areas. I mean, especially as an ESFJ, you deal with the world of relationships, right? And so I think there's some vulnerability here, and I just want to commend you for that. So thanks so much for the question, genuinely.
18 years.
Yeah.
You said they were together for a while. She said 18 years.
And how do you living with somebody you're unhappily married with, and you want it to work out and it's just not working out, that pain is real.
This is a real challenge, I think. And when it comes to relationship advice, I end up saying kind of the same thing over and over, particularly when it has to do with type compatibility. There is something to be said for personality types having statistical satisfaction with a smaller subset of other types, meaning that there are trends in relationship satisfaction. But at the end of the day, I do always champion this idea that two people of any two types can have a successful relationship, because I've seen type combinations of all across the spectrum.
To complicate it, the compatibilities, you might be attracted to somebody who not necessarily you're compatible with as much, but the attraction might be sparked there. So that is another layer of complication to all of this. Yeah,
for sure. Everything that has to do with relationships is like wildly complicated. So, I think when there's advice sought through the lens of personality type, it's very easy it's like the easiest thing is to pare it down to type combinations. That's the easiest thing to do. But I don't think it's the one that serves people the best. So yes, you're not wrong. ESFJs and INTJs can really struggle to understand where each other is coming from. And if you look at it through the lens of cognitive functions, like the two of you are using functions in your car model, right? The first four functions that are the opposite of each other. You're looking through a different judging lens, and you're looking through a different perceiving lens. So it's going to be more of a struggle to understand where the other person is coming from. And when two people are in a more stereotypically difficult type relationship, right? Two people of very different types that come from very different worldviews, we call those growth relationships. And the reason why is because you have to grow in order for the relationship to last. it puts an extra burden on each person to do extra legwork to meet the other person halfway. And not everybody's willing to put that legwork in, which is why I don't think that these relationships always last. Not because they can't, but because it's hard. It's much more difficult. When you're in a relationship where you see eye to eye with the other person cognitively, those are much easier day-to-day relationships, but they don't often encourage growth. I'd argue, Joel, that you and I have had the most growth in our judging polarity, like the fact that you're introverted feeling authenticity, extroverted thinking effectiveness. That's your polarity. And my polarity is introverted thinking accuracy and extroverted feeling harmony. Our biggest clashes come from those places because that's where we have wildly different judging criteria, right? Like when we see something, what's super obvious to us as being the thing that needs to be honored the most is not going to be the obvious thing to the other person. And that has required us to meet the other person halfway, to understand what's going on with them, not to just demand whatever's happening in our world and our little neck of the cognitive spectrum. So I will give an absolute nod that the type combination you're talking about is one that's going to definitely and definitively fit in the growth relationship category. But that doesn't mean you can't get there. It just means that you have to be willing to take yourself out of your own territory, your own neck of the woods. It sounds like you're willing to do that, which is fantastic because on some level, as an ESFJ, it's going to be a little more difficult for you to get into the mindset of an INTJ than it is going to in reverse. And that's because INTJs have introverted intuition or perspectives as their dominant or driver function. Their flow state is understanding how somebody else is, sort of the perspective that they're coming from. Now, that doesn't mean that your husband is necessarily using that in your behalf. We can get defensive as people. We can sort of put our stake in the ground and decide we're not going to provide a certain service for the other person if we fear that it will be exploited or if it will be used against us. And I have noticed that sometimes, in particular INTJs, but I have known intuitive types to shut off their intuitive abilities because they think that the other person is using it to manipulate them. And I'm not saying that that's where you're at in your relationship. I'm just saying that just because your husband has this as his dominant or driver doesn't mean that he's always using it in your behalf. So it's not good news he's doing that. The good news is that he is fully capable of doing that. And so that's nice. That means that you are willing to go halfway to meet him on a cognitive level and that he's wired to be able to do the same for you without that much persuasion, right? Without that much trying to force the issue or make it happen.
Well, it might be persuasion, but he certainly has a mechanism for it. He has the ability. You might have to do some pretty hard persuasion to get him to do what he needs to do there.
Well, that's true. Yeah. What I'm saying is that it's not both persuasion and skill development.
And mechanism. He has the mechanism and abilities to meet you and see your perspective is what you're saying.
Exactly. So, okay, where's the breakdown then? Oftentimes in a relationship between two people, when things get difficult, when there's not a natural free flow of communication that allows each person to feel understood, unfortunately, what ends up happening is that the misunderstandings then get sorted as being intentional. That's very easy to do, particularly when you love somebody. When you really love someone, they have the capacity to hurt you the most. And the longer we're with somebody that we fell in love with and committed ourselves to for the rest of our lives, we can get to a place where we think we're numbed out, but that still has a very weighty element to it. It means something. It's important. And the familiarity that we create with that other person ends up becoming, well, it goes through multiple different stages and styles of love. It might be intense in the beginning. It might be more sort of routinized later, but you're still going to be in a space of love. Now, our friend Bruce Music, he has been on our podcast before as a guest. He teaches attachment styles. He says that relationships go through 3 different cycles. They go through the honeymoon phase initially, and then they go through the power phase or the power struggle phase. And then on the other side of the power struggle is where they get to like a really intimate bond. And The challenge is getting out of the power struggle into that third phase.
Because sometimes power struggles can go on for decades. Couples can just be there their entire relationship, and they never get past it to the next phase of intimacy.
Yes, exactly. And so there is a real danger of people who are cognitively wired differently to end up staying in the hamster wheel of the power struggle, not because they're just trying to be powerful themselves as individuals, although that might be part of it, that each person wants to be in control. But on a cognitive level, we want how we see the world to be the ultimate arbiter of how the world is seen, right? The power struggle might be also happening on a very abstract cognitive place where it's like, well, who gets to decide which worldview is the right one? Is it introverted intuition or is it introverted sensing? And how do we decide what the ultimate criteria to make decisions is going to be? Is it going to be extroverted thinking or is it going to be extroverted feeling? And then it's a power struggle that ends up, having all these different stories and narratives and specific circumstances and situations you can point to and go, well, I thought it should be like this, but he thought it should be like this, right? But at the underneath all of that, if you sort of pare it down to its core principles, most of the time, I bet it's extroverted feeling versus extroverted thinking, butting heads, or introverted sensing versus introverted intuition, butting heads. And then on down the line. And so there may be some wisdom in taking time to go, okay, so when we're in a power struggle, is it possible for me to stop for a moment and go, okay, I know what the extroverted feeling desires are here. I know what I want out of this. What does he want out of it using extroverted thinking? And why does that also have facility? How does that also come in here? And is there a way we can match them? Is there a way we can have them be compatible with each other?
And this is great that you're learning about type and you're learning about the INTJ personality in particular, because you're going to use your co-pilot of introverted sensing or memory to understand those data points, to understand that information. So when you have that moment of a power struggle, you have something to pull from. You have a resource now through your learning about type to go, what do I know about INTJs? What do I know about their co-pilot or auxiliary process of extroverted thinking effectiveness? What do I know about how they show up and the needs of that function? And that's going to help you do what Antonia just said, because when you're caught up in the midst of something or you're trying to solve a problem, slowing down and really getting in touch with what you know as an ESFJ is such leverage, because that's where the gold is, because that's where the information lives for you.
Yeah. So my recommendation at this point is to check out the podcast with Bruce Music. They're great, all of them. It's spelled Muzik. So if you go to our website and you put it into the search field, you look up Bruce Music, Muzik, you'll find all of his podcasts, and they're fantastic. I highly recommend it. Learning about attachment styles is high leverage. And then if you have the capacity, I also recommend maybe checking out our couples mapping program. And in couples mapping, we do what we just talked about. We sit down and do a side-by-side comparison, or we walk you through how to do a side-by-side comparison and understand the needs of each of these cognitive functions and the assumptions that they make. The assumptions they make that when a person doesn't see what they see, well, that person must not be looking, or it must somehow be deliberate. And so it helps cover some of these blind spots of where's the other person really coming from, and how do we meet in the middle, as opposed to just vying for the supremacy of our functions.
I am going to give you 2 tangible actions, though, today as well to take. I think couple mapping, by the way, you said, Antonia, I completely agree. But I want to give you something immediate right now, especially if you're an ESFJ listening. This is really powerful. If you can sit down and get really clear on your own needs and writing those down and as much detail and fidelity as possible, and then also make a separate list of the desires and wants you have. Both of these exercises are going to be immensely challenging for you because you're used to getting other people's needs met. So to reflect that back to yourself of your own needs is going to be really hard. It's like, I don't know what I need. What does somebody else need? Then I'll know what I need. So this is going to be a great exercise for you. And also, I think, getting in touch with your desires and wants, because this is also going to be challenging in you're so used to just deferring to other people often about what they want and desire, that this is going to be such an exercise for you to see, what do I want in life? What are my desires in life? And you articulated them, by the way, a little earlier when you said, I want to stay together. I want this relationship to work out. So you have some of those desires, but what are some of the other desires of your heart that come up when you think about them. Maybe those trips you never took, or the adventures you want to go on, or the projects you want to start, or the people you want to connect with. I think those two lists can be really powerful for an SFJ, ISFJ and ESFJ. Well, any FJ in the Myers-Briggs system can benefit from sitting down and making those two lists. And I want to encourage you to that project as well. Thanks so much for the question. You can ask your own question about personality types or personal growth. Visit personalityhacker.com/questions. We also have programs designed to help you with your personal growth through the lens of personality types. Again, visit personalityhacker.com and find the program that's made just for you. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
Thank you for listening to 10-Minute Type Advice by Personality Hacker. We'll talk with you on the next episode. If you're focused on personal growth, I think you'll resonate with our core content over at personalityhacker.com. We want to see you understand how your mind is wired so you can generate motivation, improve social skills, find career opportunities, and master excellent decision-making. But a quick warning, we are advice and action-focused in all of our articles, podcasts, and videos. This means that we attract people who like to be challenged to become excellent, to take action, to put in the work to optimize themselves, not simply just gather more information. If you are committed to personal growth and ready to radically find your inner truth, then come over and be a part of our growing community of like minds at Personality Hacker.